So hello everybody. I will maybe slow down a little bit in the beginning so we can get everybody seated. But let's start with a little intro. Today I want to focus on something what is already written in the name, which is Edge Services from AWS. If you guys don't know which are those, I will try to go through it in the intro. I will try to also give you a little introduction into the services itself, so you can expect at least that. But I just want to ask a simple question. Have you anyone here is using CloudFront in a production? Just okay, good, at least that. And AWS WAF, a little bit less people, I would expect that. Okay, so today, first, as I said, I will go through the intro and then I will get right into one case study from one actual customer that we have. And this will be mainly about CloudFront and the logs that you can get from the CloudFront. And then there will be something what maybe someone already know, but I basically put together some great latest news about CloudFront and WAF. But I also will tell you guys what I think about them and maybe how I would use them in my projects. And then I will try to go, and I think this is the critical part for someone probably here, but it's the little one here. So I think it will take only a couple of minutes. So why AWS Edge Services matter today? Basically, I know that probably today there will be a lot of sessions about AI and stuff around AI, but I actually focus on Edge Services. So I try to basically focus on something what probably a lot of companies still use and will use in the future. And maybe they can start using them at some point. I see that the security threats are evolving today. The bots, the layer 7 DDoS and malicious traffic are increasing. I see this in our customers, and everybody is trying to basically find a simple way how to deal with it. I know that there are some competitors on the market that are doing a great job in this, but today I want to focus on the services that AWS is offering, which is like first is Route 53, which is probably the simplest service here, but it's used widely and mainly for the DNS. So you can just put domain there if you didn't know that and use it. Then there is AWS WAF, which is another edge service. And this is great mainly against those things that are named there. But basically it checks that the actual requests that are going to the website that are in HTTP requests, for example, there is a lot of headers and stuff going there. It can be something about the browser, it can be something about the request itself. So the major part, the long part. And this is what AWS WAF does. It checks it, and then you can get a set of rules. It can be also a rate limiting rule, for example. So it just checks how much of the requests are going from one IP per 5 minutes, for example. And this can be taken as a DDoS protection, basically, because if someone is using one IP many times and hitting your app, for example, 15,000 times per minute, it seems like a DDoS. I know that people are trying to hit F5 as much as they want, but I don't expect that this will be 10,000s per minute. So this is what WAF does. And then there is CloudFront that I saw a lot of you guys are using already, but it's a content delivery network that basically is there to also protect your infrastructure in a way that basically every request that will go to the origin itself will have to go through CloudFront first. So you can work with it there. I think a lot of customers are using it for caching. but there are also some other parts of CloudFront that can be used, like some computing. And then there is Shield, which is, I think, kind of hidden behind the Route 53 and CloudFront in a way that it actually protects against those DDoS attacks on third and fourth layer. So the network layer, these are different. These are floods, and AWS actually gives you Shield standard for free. Then there is a Shield Advanced, which is not for free, and it actually starts with $3,000 per month. So I wouldn't expect a lot of customers are using it. I saw it in the projects. It's working very well, but I think AWS is actually working these days to put some of the functions from the Shield Advanced to the WAF, because before it was like that. So the first thing will be about a case study. I'm working for Stormit, and we are focusing on Edge, but we definitely also focusing on AI today and other stuff that are on AWS. In majority of cases, it can be like Kubernetes or other types of containers. And what I see from my clients and our clients is that first thing that usually they want from the Edge and the Edge services is the easy setup and management, then some monitoring capabilities, and also cost optimization. Because if there is a way how to use the pay-as-you-go pricing on AWS not very well, it's also in the Edge, because it's paid like that. And first thing I want to talk about is actually one request from our customer, which was for deeper CloudFront monitoring. There are some dashboards and some information that you get from CloudFront directly, actually for free, but some customers are trying to find a way how to get those information in a better way. Why is that? Why they are trying to use the Edge for it? The answer to it is simple. Basically, the requests that are going to CloudFront doesn't have to go to the origin because of the caching. So you want to work on an Edge layer, which in this case is CloudFront CDN, to get those information, because you wouldn't be able to get all of the information on the origin. And that's where it started with this customer. They started using CloudFront, and before they got those information from the origin. So the number of actual requests, the region that is coming from, and status code and data transfer. But it was specific for a specific file. And this is something what definitely you will not find in CloudFront directly. There are some things like I know that there is like most used files or what is in there, and you will find those information there. But if in this case it was a global shoe seller with thousands of visitors, so they definitely have millions of pictures somewhere on the origin, and they want to understand this for every picture separated and also filter it out based on those things. To be honest, don't ask me why they want it, because it's more about the solution than why they needed it. And how it's possible in CloudFront. This is a solution that you could use probably in wide variety of things. First, it starts with something called CloudFront standard logs, which you can get actually basically for free from CloudFront to S3 bucket. And you can work with them anyhow. Like you can even manually go through them if you would like, but I wouldn't expect that. And that's where we used other services, in this case Athena queries. If you are not familiar with this service, what it basically does, it can work with the data and with the SQL queries. The data was in Parquet format, and what we needed at the end is to visualize the stuff to the customer, because all those first three things are more for developers and people that actually understand AWS. But for the customer, what they needed is to see the actual graphs. And that's where we basically used AWS Managed Grafana. Grafana itself, I think it's open source, so you would be able to use different type. But because we were already with everything in AWS and we needed some simple solution for it, we decided to use AWS Managed Grafana in this case. So, like in this case, what you see here is probably everything. Maybe there was some Lambda doing this stuff between, but that's probably too deep for today. And what was the result for the client was that they are able to access Grafana dashboards in AWS and get those information simply by what you see here. Not every information is here because I think there was multiple tables, but you can see that here basically is a file name. So something what they wanted, exactly one picture, you see the request and then the data transfer. But there is a map to it, so they can map it, how many people are using that picture in those separate regions. And that's definitely something what you wouldn't be able to find in CloudFront itself. And I actually checked other CDNs too, and I think these deeper stuff are usually more advanced, and you have to also use the logs. So it's not specific to CloudFront that you need to create something like this for yourself or for the clients in our case. So this was the case study, and now I want to focus more on the latest updates. Basically, the first one seems not very interesting, but basically, I had a lot of talk with AWS people that are working in the Edge team about how CloudFront and WAF works today, or right now it's changing probably, but basically before, let's say 1 year before this, so 2024, what you would have to do probably when you wanted to use these kind of services in AWS, you need to go to a console or use Terraform. But let's say in the console, because a lot of people are using consoles for CloudFront and WAF, they don't use infrastructure as a code that much. And it is kind of difficult to set those services separately, because as you guys probably know, in AWS you have those, like, you have to find the service, then click through the service and do the stuff in the service itself. And it's visible that AWS is trying to change that, and I would expect that they will definitely go that way even more in the future, that they are trying to put together these services, these edge services. So you are able basically to create, for example, as you can see here, is a load balancer integration, that when you will create load balancer, you are able to just there create CloudFront and WAF together right away, which simplifies things for those new people maybe in the AWS that are trying to find a way how to use these all services. And this goes probably even deeper. You can see that CloudFront is also changing a way how it's deployed today. You can simply check the enable security protections there, and you will get a simple, like, 3 rules from Web Application Firewall that basically protects your website right away against those things that are mentioned here, but basically some most common vulnerabilities found in the web applications today. So you don't need to know web application firewall that well to deploy everything and set it up for those CloudFront deployments now in the console. And this was overall, but now I want to focus on the WAF. And actually, I think there is more than this in the WAF, like newly. But the first thing that I want to mention here is actually AWS WAF anti-DDoS AMR, it's called. Basically, it's a service that, or a rule that I will describe a little bit more. But what I have to say, this is one of those things that previously was accessible only in Shield Advanced. And Shield Advanced costed $3,000, and you actually have to like subscribe for 1 year. And this new thing, anti-DDoS, brings one part which I think is pretty useful for a lot of like open websites, public websites that have, for example, some sign-up pages, sign-in pages, everything what could possibly be like taken by some DDoS attack. And what they did, they put it into the WAF itself, and it actually costs $20 per month, which is pretty reasonable, at least from my point of view, because what it offers and what is the main point of it is it's trying to be automatic. So you should be able to set it up pretty much quickly with some simple setup in there and be running against the DDoS attack on the 7th layer. Basically, this is how it looks, how it's set up. So you will see like a couple of stuff there for the sensitivity, which can be set up in the multiple ways. But what I need to mention here is that it has some baseline and it's functional within 15 minutes. But what it doesn't have is no prior traffic log analysis capability. Basically, it doesn't work very well if you already went through a DDoS attack and now are trying to find a way how to get the data from the DDoS attack and use it for the future. This is not the service or rule in the AWS WAF that you will use, because it doesn't go through the old data. Also, you can definitely customize the URLs that it checks, but also what you can do, and I don't see it here, it's that you don't have to check every file type. I wouldn't expect that you want to, for example, check pictures with this kind of rule. So you probably want to be more focused on the dynamic content and just basically not use it for the static content. And this is like a best practice. If you would consider this AWS WAF anti-DDoS as a new thing, these best practices actually came out from AWS team. I actually think the first one is the one that I already described. You have to make sure that you activate this protection during normal operations and not when you are under DDoS attack already. So I know that it would be a great thing if you could just go to console and activate this in an attack, and it will just go through the logs or whatever and then work. But it has to be activated before. And also, like the second part, which is validate in staging first, in this case, I think it's kinda not very useful, because I saw this many times with WAF, that in best practices, they will tell you that you should test it out in staging first. But some of those rules that you set up in WAF, you are not able to actually tell if they work on dev environment. You would probably need to create some kind of DDoS attack on the environment and then see if it works, but I wouldn't expect this. So in this case, you can validate if it's possible on the staging environment, but overall, I would rather start this anti-DDoS thing even on a production level, but try it in more of a counting mode, which is something what AWS WAF offers overall. So you are able to see what it would block, but not actually blocking it. So in the logs, you can then count and see what is happening with those new rules. And this is applicable for all AWS WAF rules. that it's in staging, okay, but I would expect that it will not show you the right numbers and right data. So it's better to run it in those counting modes in production, basically. So you don't really change anything, you don't really block anyone, but you see the real data that you can use. No problem. You can ask if you want. You mean like you mean like a rule in WAF? How many? How many? It's only one. Or you are asking about the number of rules or roots? Rules. Yeah, you have one, which is a rule. I would call this a rule in AWS WAF, but maybe it's something. What do you mean? Is it sorry? Is it this one and this one, basically? So you have three if you are asking that. But we can go through that after the session if you want. It's all right. Yeah, that I would expect. Okay, okay, we can discuss that after if you want. And another part, which actually like is UX UI and the logs that you get, and normally it would be pretty hard to go through them, is now available in this matter. Actually, I just want to mention here that it's not a default option. It was, I think, for a month. Then AWS decided to change it to not a default option. So if you are interested to see how the new WAF is looking, you have to change it in the console and go through the information there. What I think is the reason behind this decision that it's not a default option is actually it's working with the logs, and I think some customers actually was against the price of it. I know that AWS, I think actually that on Reinvent they will tell the people that it's for free now. I'm not 100% sure, but they are working on a solution when this kind of information would be free in WAF. Because now you would have to pay for the logs that it actually like shows in this graphical way. So if you are interested, start it for a while, go through it. It's pretty interesting. It actually changes totally the way how WAF works overall. This is only one picture, but it definitely changes it that way that I would expect that WAF could be for people that are actually not like very familiar with AWS overall. So even those like people that haven't even seen console ever. So they are changing the way how WAF will work, and now already there are some pretty interesting stuff in there. And the latest enhancements in CloudFront, yeah, a couple of great stuff. First, basically a SaaS manager, which is something what can help you in a case where you have a lot of customers, which I would expect in a SaaS environment, that are basically connecting to the one origin server, for example, but need different domain names and different certificates in that case. And what you will get at the start of this is only one distribution. So it's before you would be able to do this in CloudFront, but you would have to create a lot of distributions with a lot of different CloudFront domain names. And what it brings, it centralizes this stuff and actually like helps you to deploy it into AWS. Who benefits from it? As I said, I think mainly those companies that have a lot of customers that need separated domain and connect to the same origin with maybe like different paths, for example. I actually have one type of this customer that before we had to deploy like 100 CloudFront distributions for them. I did it through CDK, but it's still kind of problematic. It's because the code is too long and I had to separate it or whatever. So this is a solution for those that have tens of CloudFront distributions or plan to do that just because they need different domain names and TLS certificates. And also there is some potential to definitely define other things specifically for those clients. And VPC origins is actually something what can be interesting for majority of customers on AWS that use CloudFront with load balancer. I wouldn't expect that everybody would change the way how they deploy the stuff now, but it's more about the best practices, how we could do it in the future. Because what you see here, and I expect someone from you actually know this, you have a private subnet for EC2 behind the load balancer. That's a normal way how it was done before, and the actual connection between the load balancer and the CloudFront could be secured many ways, but it was always kind of like not 100% basically. And now what you can do, and the reason is basically that there is a client somewhere here, and if you don't like protect it very well, he can basically go around CloudFront. And if you are one of those companies that have EC2 open to the internet and not even in the private subnet, he could hit EC2 if he got the domain or the IP. And now what you are able to do, because before only the EC2 could be like in the private subnet, and now what you can do is put load balancer into the private subnet and connect it to the CloudFront via the VPC origins. So more secure, it doesn't cost anything. I think I will see this in the best practices in the future. If you are asking why and how would you connect to the EC2 if it doesn't have a public IP address? Because if it's in private subnet, it doesn't have to have public IP address. There are some ways in AWS where you can connect to EC2 directly, even with only private IP. So that's one thing. And IPv6 origins, I will not talk about it much because I only have 2 minutes left. But basically, it adds a possibility to add the IPv6 origin to CloudFront. And now to cost optimization strategies. Overall, I think if you would ask any AI today for a cost optimization of CloudFront, it will answer you a couple of things. And I think for non-technical people, they will go to it and it will be basically a mess. But overall, I selected one thing that I saw on Reddit, for example, many times these days and from the past, is that a lot of customers doesn't know that actually CloudFront now has a, like, I would call it a generous free tier, but for someone it's still too low. But basically, CloudFront offers 1 terabyte, and overall, what you see here basically counts toward like $100, let's say, maybe a little bit more if you count it in the previous costs. So for a smaller project, this can be significant because CloudFront is basically now free. You will get this SSL certificate for free. That's normal in AWS. But what is necessary to say, and I think this is one part that adds to it, the actual traffic that goes from the services that are in AWS already to the clients. Normally you pay for the data transfer. But what needs to be said, and why I am saying it, if you put here a different CDN, you will pay for the data transfer from the services to the CDN. It really depends on the use case, but in a case, if the data transfer is high and the caching in the cloud in the CDN is low, this can be significant if you change CloudFront to different CDN. So that's what I wanted to mention here about CloudFront. And also one like thing about how to save money on CloudFront is to use a specific edge locations, which is here. And then there are some offerings for the private pricing from the partners like us, or you can get the security savings bundle from AWS directly for WAF and CloudFront together. So I know I didn't go really deep in how to technically save money with CloudFront, because to be honest, there is not much. You can change the caching somehow, but overall it's more about those things that I described. And because we have only a minute left, about the WAF. Overall, what I saw in our customer cases and how you can save money is that not all traffic is equal to WAF. You don't really need to check everything with WAF rules. You can go deep and understand what really needs to go through WAF. And I'm not like telling that it's like simple to change it, but there is basically a possibility to change the scope which AWS WAF works with. And this can be done with, for example, regex button, which you see there, which is, I think, ChatGPT is able to basically tell you what it is and how to deploy it. But basically, you just tell WAF which file types it doesn't have to check. This is something to start with. It will save you some costs of WAF because it costs something to check every request. Another part, which is kind of like not very deep, but what I saw in a lot of customer cases, they are trying to use a lot of rules, like for different reasons, but they just deploy a lot of rules into the WAF and expect that it will work. This, I think, is not a great option. It can save you some money to just go through WAF and actually understand if some of those rules actually should exist and are helpful to you. So I know this was not too deep, but about those two services, I don't think there is much to do. Like if you already optimized it, like with those things that I mentioned here, I don't expect that you are able to save a lot of money on using them. And we are at the end. I think, are there any questions that, okay.